Today I'm speaking with forensic medium Sheila Marie. Sheila Marie is a world-renowned forensic medium who's made a significant impact in the field of criminal investigations, both nationally and internationally. Working collaboratively with the FBI and various law enforcement agencies around the globe, she's contributed to the resolution of numerous notorious world events, missing person cases, and both fresh and cold criminal investigations. Her remarkable abilities have successfully connected agencies and families with valuable data, landmarks, maps, and guidance. Today, she's credited with resolving over 400 high-profile criminal cases, leaving an indelible mark on the world of forensic investigation. And now, my conversation with Sheila Marie. Hi! So, exciting news. Book number 2, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Investigates Even More Evidence of an Afterlife and Fights for Justice with Her Dead Dog, is ready. You can get it everywhere in both ebook and paper. This book essentially picks up where WTF Part 1 left off. I continue to experience a bunch of what the fuckery, and it's a bit different now because I know the mediums pretty well, so I get some actual opinions on what they thought of me when they first met me. I get more crazy signs, and the evidence just keeps accumulating. I keep bugging my dad for that one sign I really, really wanted, and some really crazy stuff happens related to that. I conduct experiments with psychic medium Joe Peretta, and again, bunch of what the fuckery. And in a really weird twist, I get called as a secondary witness to testify in the Harvey Weinstein case, which is a secondary plot. And that results in my dog, Peanut, who is on the other side, and sending me some signs, ends up becoming famous. So if you want to keep hearing about scientific evidence of an afterlife and this really bizarre side story, you can go order my second book in the series. I love getting to say that now. WTF Just Happens, actually a series. So you can go to my website, and that links to everywhere this book's available. It's available in ebook and print, not yet audiobook. That's not going to be nearly as long as it was for book 1, but it's going to be a few more months. So you can go to my website and order WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Investigates Even More Evidence of an Afterlife and Fights for Justice with Her Dead Dog. Welcome to What the F Just Happened? I'm your host, Liz Enton. If you listened to the intro, you know my story. If not, here's a brief summary. I'm a sciencey skeptic, and when my dad died, I took a shot in the dark and decided to investigate if there was any possible evidence of an afterlife. I assumed that was as realistic as Santa Claus, but I was desperate. However, I was so blown away by what I discovered that I wrote a book and launched this podcast. In this podcast, I'll be talking to some fairly normal people about some really weird stuff. I speak with everyone from psychic mediums and afterlife researchers to ordinary people who've had some inexplicable experiences. So come, listen. There's no need to draw any final conclusions. Keep an open mind and wonder, what the F just happened? Hi. Today I am speaking with forensic medium Sheila Marie. And yeah, forensic medium, really interesting. She works and helps solve cases and has a really fascinating story. So, welcome, Sheila. Do I say Sheila or Sheila Marie when I speak with you?
Sheila Marie,
Sheila
whatever you
Marie.
want. It's okay,
Okay,
either or.
whatever
Yeah.
you want. What's your name then? So, welcome, Sheila Marie. It's great to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me. I thank you.
Well, thank you. And you had such a very like down to earth tone in your book, and you come to all of this from a very, down to earth history and perspective, And so I guess why don't you share a little bit about your backstory, your original life before you really tapped into these abilities as a
Oh my
career? Yeah.
gosh. That's what
I
makes
mean,
my story so unique, I think, because I'm just like everybody else, you know? I never ever believed in psychic mediums or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I never even went to a psychic ever in my life. And because I was brought up Catholic, and I thought to myself, oh my God, if I go to a psychic, I'm going to go to hell, right? And I don't want to have bad karma in my life and my journey. So I completely stayed away from anything like that. My mom, she used to always call me, oh, she used to say, you're psychic, you're psychic. And I'm like, don't say that to me. That's horrible. I thought it was like, an insult, because we were Roman Catholic, really thick ones, And but yeah, so I guess I always knew that I had a connection. If you read the book that we made, The Forensic Medium, The Power of the Unseen, if you read the book, you'll see a little bit about my life in there and about how I was as a child, this and that. But what I've come to find out is that, um, like, I don't know, how do I say it? What I've come to find out is that we're all able to connect with spirit. Not anyone is more gifted than the other. It's just a matter of tapping into it. Sometimes our lives are different and our foundations of our journeys are different. So some are just a little bit more in tuned, but I find, and some of us have a calling. For me, it was a calling. It's not anything that I invited into my life. It kind of came at me. And then it was like the universe saying, okay, Sheila, what are you going to do with this? So like for example, I was, I was married, I had children, I was vacation school Bible teacher and everything, really. And there's nothing wrong with religions, isn't there? I have nothing wrong with that, but I just don't like the control in religions. And so anyways, I was living the life. I was a police officer and married to a police officer, yada, yada, yada. So this is how it began. So this is really funny. I love telling the story. So I was in my room, my daughter was little, and I was talking to my Italian sister-in-law on the telephone, and I said to her, I'm upstairs in my bedroom and it started raining out. It's nighttime. And I said, is it raining at your house? She's like, no. I'm like, that's weird. So I went and I shut the window and I heard like uh, hmm, lightning, and it rained just a little. I'm like, that's weird. So I'm sitting on the bed, and all of a sudden, now at the end of my bed is the entrance to a bathroom. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting on my bed and I see this white light, and it must have been about 4 inches, not 4 inches, 4 feet high. And it kind of went around. It was like, this is the room. It kind of went around and like that. And I went, oh my God. She's like, what? I'm like, oh my God. She's like, what is it? I'm like, there's something. Are you seeing spirits? She said. I'm like, no. Oh my God. And then all of a sudden the white light took off and it flew over the room. But I could see it with my eyes. This wasn't in my head or anything like that. And my daughter saw it too. She's like, look, mama. And I'm like, oh my God. And so my Italian sister-in-law said, you're seeing spirit and you need to go to classes and learn how to do that. I'm like, and in my mind, I'm thinking, you're out of your freaking mind. I'm like, nope, sorry, I'm not doing that. So for Christmas, she gives me a gift certificate. Go meet your spirit guide class. I'm like, oh, thank you very much. And of course, the good person that I am, I put it in the cabinet and I didn't see it for another year. And I said, I am not going to a class like that. She's out of her freaking mind. Well, she was very intimidating. And so a year later, I said to myself, I better go to that class because Christmas is coming and she's coming over. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to deal with the wrath of her. Right. And So I went, and it was a meet your spirit guide class, which is like basically meditations, And so I go in there, and the lady brings us into a meditation, and I said, "Oh my God, I know how to meditate," because when I was a little girl, my dad was a police officer, chief of police, and all that kind of fun stuff, and he was learning hypnosis on the side, but actually it was really mediumship, and what he was doing was he would tap into his meditation and see license plates and help with hit and run cases. And so I would go visit him every other week, and he'd sit me on the couch and he'd go, "Okay, Sheila, close your eyes." And he'd take me on a meditation. So when I was real young, my dad opened up that channel for me because I trusted him and I trusted the universe. So I was very relaxed. So when I walked into that class, it was meditation class, and I said, "Oh, I can do this, I trust this." And what happened is when I got in the meditation, I started seeing things that I wasn't thinking, that I understood, and I'm thinking, "Whoa, this stuff is real." And I'm not some crazy cultic person, or you know what I mean, or evil or anything like that. So this is really cool. And I'm like, so from there, I realized that everyone is able to tap into the universal energies, and people call it different definitions. But I do know that I was a person of light and love, and I'm kind, I'm not evil, I'm not out to hurt people or anything like that. So I said, well, this can't be that bad. And so I started tapping into it and started learning my mediumship and developing it more. And what I found is that I was very developed already. But I think it's because I had been open from when I was a child as well. So my goal, so when I left this class and I came home, this is really funny. This is where it all started and it ended at the same time too, in a good way. I came home and I said to my husband, "I have to do this." He goes, "What do you got to do?" And I'm like, "I have to do mediumship." And he's like, "What's mediumship?" And I said, like psychic readings. Are like, "Oh, great." And I said to him right in his eyes, I said, "Listen, you can divorce me right now, and it's okay. I totally understand this," because I was the biggest skeptic. I said, "But I have to do this." I said, "If I don't do this and teach people how to connect with the universe, I'm going to die." He's like, "What?" I'm like, that's how strong it was for me. I'm like, "I have to do this. I'm sorry, but I have to do this." And that's my marriage ended many years later, but that was the beginning of the end of that because he was not very open to that, which was fine. And I understood that. And I accept that this is my calling, that I need to teach people how to connect. So that happened several years, 20 something years ago, and 27 years ago, actually. And um, I accepted that, and that's how it came. So that happened. So that was the shift for me, how I got into mediumship. It was not anything that I had planted. And then years later, I thought to myself, "Oh, say, okay, I need to learn how to do this so I could teach people how to connect." And during that time, I did readings, this and that. And then the next thing I know, invested people started coming to me, and I'll tell you about my Babe Ruth story later on, but that's how that all happened. And then forensics happened after that. So it was nothing I had planned. And I'm okay with that because I was at the time I was really heavy Catholic, and I said, if Jesus, God, Mary, whoever that is who's ever, doing what they're supposed, if I'm not supposed to see anything, don't let me see. And you know what happened? I saw more. So I said, okay, so yeah. So I said, okay, I'm taking this. This is my calling. And that's how I knew I was supposed to teach,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, just because our listeners might not know, in the Catholic religion, mediumship and psychic readings is considered evil. Is that correct? In case anyone's
Absolutely.
confused about what the
Absolutely.
concern
Yes.
is.
And the
Okay.
funny part is my kids were at parochial school and everything, I mean, I really had to leave my life that was in front, or that I was in, to do my calling. But it didn't even dawn on me. I'm like, I was okay with that. I was okay with it 300%. It didn't even shatter me. And still now to this day, I know I'm on my path. You know what I mean? And yeah, so Yeah, it was not easy, but it was hard too. It was some hard, and it still is too, because society's like that. But it's really funny. I was in India last year for 3 months, and they're very accepting because in India I'm a goddess because I'm able to connect with the universe, because that's what they're doing every day in meditation and yogi and all that. And so when I'm here, the joke, this is funny. The joke is, that I'm a witch, but that's not true. I don't see myself at that at all, but it just matters about the different cultures and stuff and what you're open to. And I just find the more that I share my life and my journey with people, it's amazing how you learn and you continue to learn.
Right. Well, what was the very first psychic or mediumship experience you ever had? I assume that was when you
Hmm.
were a child and you didn't understand it, or
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Well, I guess I've always been psychic. I just didn't realize it. I just thought that everybody understood like they were seeing and feeling the same thing as I were, like I would be outside playing and I was you want to call me a dreamer in a sense, I would be outside for hours just looking at a tree, seriously. And but I want to say as a psychic, I don't know. I've had, I guess, it started with nightmares as a child because a lot of them were visions. They weren't nightmares, you know what I mean? And so when you're young, you're heightened. Everything is really heightened, all your senses, all your outer senses, but not just your outer senses like your sight, your hearing, your feeling, your inner senses, your inner light system as well. And I actually talk about that in the book, your inner light system, because how we connect to the universe is the 11th system, of the body. And so it's an inner light connection, but it's different. It's what a lot of people call the clairsees, clairvoyant, clairaudient, this, yada, 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 and clairsentient. So it's an inner seeing and feeling. And so to me, developing as a child, and getting hormones, you get more sensitive, and never mind just your runabout everyday child who's just a normal child, but I know I consider myself normal. What I feel is that everybody's able to do this. I feel that our life is what blocks it, our circumstances, what's given to us on our plate when we're little. And this is definitely a learning place where we are here, and but I can't really recall my first psychic experience because I guess I've just been that way my whole life,
I
yeah.
I guess what was the first verified one where you're like, wow,
Oh,
that's
let's see.
undeniably not in my head. That's
Well,
weird.
I would say mm, well, let's see. I could go back. Well, it's really interesting. I would say in class, when I started developing my mediumship, when people understand anything that I'm saying, I'm blown away. I'm like, you understand that? You understand? I'm like, I still to this day, I'm like, you understand this person? I'm like, that's crazy. I'm like, I mean, and someone said, don't use the word crazy. I'm like, but it is. I'm just crazy in a fun way, And it's like, wow, I can't believe that you understand what I'm saying. I would say, I've had thousands, of psychic experience, but a couple that have really come out to me, which I'm just amazed about, was I would say one of my first experiences with forensics was yeah. So I had this guy and his name was Kevin. He was my assistant and he actually this is part of the Babe Ruth story. Is that okay? Yeah. So I'm trying to think, oh yeah, I remember. So I got a phone call to go into Sudbury, Massachusetts, which is, for people who don't know, it's the historical spot of the beginning of the United States. And so we're going way back in George Washington days and all that. And he says, we'd like you to come out on every Sunday and stand in a field and tell us what you see. I'm like, sure, because this is like in the King Philip Woods and the revolution happened here. And I said, sure. Oh, that sounds like fun. So on Sunday, and you have to remember, I didn't tell anybody I was a medium. Not anyone knew I was a medium. I would travel an hour every Sunday to practice my mediumship. Because I lived a double life, because it was really sad, people are still that way still, but it's okay. I figured if they don't come to my house for coffee, then they don't need to be in my life. And right. So I went to, they said, come on out. So I went out there. We did a documentary. I was, being filmed, and I went back like 400 years in my head. And this is kind of really cool. So when I was in fourth grade, I started experiencing really bad nightmares, but my nightmares weren't in my head. They were visions in my room. And I didn't really know how to tell my mom that. I was telling her, I told her, I'll never forget this. I saw George Washington sitting on my bureau. She's like, what? I'm like, yes. And I go, he wouldn't go away. So anyways, this is funny. So when I get to the King Philip Woods, in my head, in my vision, so my vision not is physical, is not in, not with the sight here, it's the inner sight. So I'm actually seeing like kind of like a daydream, but it's in front of me. Okay. And I said, oh, there's this guy. He looks like George Washington. I'm going to call him Georgie. And I said, my God, isn't that really weird how I'm having a connection with George Washington, right? So I get out, we're out there, and we're doing a documentary, and I'm reciting. And I'll have to tell you, I was not a great student in school. I was very creative. I slept through history. I don't know anything. And so I'm out in the fields, and I'm reciting poems, this and that. And I said, oh, there's this guy. I'm going to call him Georgie. And then I started singing, oh, life is a highway. I'm gonna ride it all night long. And so it turns out they told me afterwards that because they were like I'm like, why are they? I don't even understand why they're excited. And they were saying, well, where we were standing was where the highwaymen were, Sheila, and George Washington was one of them. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, it was really cool. It was awesome.
That's
So
very
like,
cool.
yeah, and we did like a couple hours of documentary, and even now then we're working with the Smithsonian, and even now I'm just blown away the things that were channeling through me from spirit. So that was really kind of cool. But anyways, that's where I met this guy named Kevin. And I knew that he had been searching for the Babe Ruth piano, but I told him I didn't want anything to do with that because you got
Okay,
to
I don't know if people know about the Babe Ruth piano. I had
Oh,
no idea what until I read your book. This was the first I heard anything like this.
oh,
So
really?
tell her, yeah,
Oh,
I never had even heard of it. So tell our listeners the
oh.
history of it first.
Okay, I'll tell you the history. So I found out the history later on too. I didn't find out in the beginning too. So what had happened is many, many years ago, Babe Ruth, who was a baseball player for the Red Sox in Boston, got drafted to the Yankees, yada, yada. He lived in Sudbury. He lived near this lake. And apparently the environmental police and many histologists, no, I don't think that's the right word. Historians. Yeah, because I have a friend who's a histologist, and she does something with skin, not history. Anyways, and they had been searching for Babe Ruth's piano because there was word that he threw, or somehow his piano got into this pond, and there's zero visibility. So the environmental police were out there for 30 years searching for this piano. Well, Kevin was he was really always searching for this piano. He would do it on his days off. I guess this is what I found out later on in life. And so, anyways, make a long story short, one day, so I would go to Sudbury for uh every Sunday and work in the fields. And what they were doing was they were tricking me. They were establishing a relationship with me to see if I was legit, if I was saying what they understood, yada, 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 because I had no clue. So one day they took me out, and there was this pond. And the first thing I envisioned in my mind was the green monster. And the green monster is the wall at Fenway Stadium in Boston where the Red Sox play. And I said, oh no, I said, this is that baseball thing. I don't want anything to do with it. And they said, come on, just give us 5 minutes each time. I said, fine, I'll give you 5 minutes of my time. I'll tell you what spirit shows me, but then let's get back to work. Sure. So they walked me up this hill, and I took this stick in this hand. I still have that stick to this day. And I went in, and I envisioned nautical marks. They gave the spirit world gave me nautical marks. And apparently I didn't realize this. I was so upset at the time, because you have to remember, I was living a double life. Nobody knew I was doing mediumship, And because
Except this one group that was
yes,
yeah. And
yeah.
what are nautical marks,
So
by the way?
nautical marks are uh, numbers and markings for, how do I say, aquatics, like in a boat, nautical. Yeah. So they gave me numbers and degrees and stuff like that.
They told
And
it to you, like you heard
yeah,
it
like
verbally, or
I envisioned it. Yeah, I didn't hear, but I envisioned. So I told them what I saw. Well, apparently they had a permit for the pond already, with divers lined up the next day. I hadn't a clue. They knew if they told me that I would not do anything. So eventually they told me. The next day they went out with divers, and they found the veneers of the piano in 10 minutes. That was a holy crap moment.
in the exact nautical
Yeah,
marks that you had gotten. And a
Yeah,
nautical marks would be a water version of like coordinates on a Google map. It would be
exactly, like
exactly
GPS.
here. It was
Yes.
like those numbers, and you got that
Yeah, like a
nautically.
summary. Boop, boop. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Isn't
that's
that
exactly where
crazy?
the piano was.
That's exactly where
Wow.
they went, and they got it. And Matt, you have to remember, they had been searching 30 years for this, and they could never find it. So it was like, holy crap. So they brought me out to the pond, and another day, and there was helicopters all around. I'll never forget this. There was helicopters all around, and I was devastated, because I'm like, oh my God. I was on the news, I was on Chronicle, I was on all kinds of stuff. I
I
wanted to
guess
cry.
people knew you were a medium then.
Well,
There's your
well, you know what? God said, you're coming out today, Sheila. And I had no choice. And there was articles about me that went all the way to India and China and Japan. I mean, all over the world. So that was the beginning of my forensics. Next thing I know, I'm getting knocks at my door, from agents and families. Can you help us find this? Can you help us with this homicide? Can you help? And that's how it happened. Now, remember, I used to be a police officer too, so I have a lot of police training. And that's how I got into forensics. And so, yeah, so that happened. That was crazy in a good way. I guess it was
yes.
just meant to happen. It was exciting, but at the same time, it was very sad for me, because people are very judging and not nice. And I was in a very political, social world, and it was hard for me to give that up. But I was okay, because I knew that it was my calling, and I didn't know at the time, but since then I've helped thousands of people. And so I'm okay with it now. At the time it was hard. And then later on, Kevin actually brought me on my first missing persons case. That was something else too, let me tell you.
So I'm going to ask you about that. But first, I want to ask you, before you came out and you were a police officer, did you use these intuitions without realizing it or without sharing it as a quote unquote normal police officer?
I would say, you know what? I knew that I was, I wouldn't say I knew I didn't, I wouldn't say I knew that I was psychic, but I knew I was pretty accurate and intuitively, And so yeah, I always felt comfortable with my investigations, and the accuracy of them. And intuition played, my intuition was very heightened, and I was very, it really, being a police officer helped me to be more intuitive as well, because you need to learn to read people, because you have to be, because it's for your safety too, And I enjoyed that part of it a lot, and the hardest part for me being a police officer is you're restricted, because you're kind of like a monkey, because you have a lot of rules you have to follow. But for me, I'm more of an entrepreneur. I'm like, okay, I actually owned my own business before I became a police officer. So I owned a cleaning business, and I so for me to have to be in confined spaces and have rules was hard for me because I was an entrepreneur spirit, but it helped me
I
a lot.
relate.
Yeah, and it helped me to uh, help other girls. I worked at Wellesley College for many years, and so I was able to help a lot of people, and I enjoyed that part of it. But I was okay. When I had my children, that's when I decided to leave the policing because I wanted to stay home for me, to be a stay-at-home mom, and that's
Right.
why I left. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
when I became pregnant, everything got really heightened, all
Your
my senses.
abilities.
Yes, and that was
Oh,
that was amazing. Yeah.
why do you think that is? Just hormone changes
I
or
do. I believe it has to
okay.
do with hormones. It has to do with energy. I was already heightened. I was always already sensitive as it was. Uh, but I think the hardest part, being a psychic and medium and empath, is it's hard to harness those emotions and harness that energy because it's so heightened. You would think that someone has high anxiety because of it, but it almost feels like that with everything. And but yeah, I forget what I was saying.
Well, I want to back up a little bit because you
Sure.
also said after finding the Babe Ruth piano and getting the nautical coordinates,
Yeah.
you then went on your first missing persons case. Tell us how you got brought onto
Oh,
that and what
yes.
happened.
So Kevin, who is the one who brought me to the historical stuff, was all over me. He was so excited about this because he's thinking he's going to make
Who
money,
is he, by the way? Is he a police officer? Is he a
No, no, no.
reporter?
He
I
was
don't
he was
understand
a
who he is.
historian in
Historian.
Sudbury.
Okay.
Yeah, historian. And so I what was I going to say? So he says, "Oh, I got our first case." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, at the time, I didn't have a lot of friends in mediumship because I didn't really know anybody, you know what I mean? I mean, I was part of the spiritualist church, this and that, and I would teach my mediumship there. And that's where basically a whole bunch of mediums hang out and stuff. But I was really a loner and stuff, so I would do readings. I had my own space. And I'm like, "Okay, Kevin, what do you got?" So I said, "Whatever." He goes, "I'm going to teach you." And I'm like, "Okay, he's going to teach me. What's he going to teach me?" He says, "I'm just going to give you a name." And now I want you to know that I had a friend of mine who passed away, who was a police officer. His name was Stu. And when I do a lot of forensics now, what I do is I ask Stu to help me. And he helps me really well. He shows me what I need to say. So anyways, he gives me a name and I tell him all this information. I still don't know anything. He goes, "Okay." He goes, "Can you go away for 2 days?" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "We got to get in a car and drive. It's far." I'm like, "You're kidding me." I'm like, "Well, I don't know if I can sleep over, but I'll come back, wherever we're going from." He goes, "Okay." So next day, next day, he goes, "Meet me tomorrow." And I said, "Okay." Now I want you to know I can't use any names or states because people are still alive and people are still suspect. So I don't want to not incriminate, that's not the right word. I want to stay safe, you know? So just so you know that. So anyways, make a long story short, I get in the car. He says, "Okay, which way do we go?" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Ask Stu." I'm like, "Okay." And of course, I'm very new at this. I'm like, "Okay." So I'm asked, he's like, "Go north." And he goes, "Okay, how far do we go north?" I'm not kidding you. I drove through I'm not going to tell you the exact how many states. I drove I drove through 3 states. We drove through 3 states and he goes, "What number? What number is the interstate?" Now you have to remember, Kevin and I had been working. We found the Babe Ruth piano, we did the documentary. So he understood my mediumship and he understood what he needed to ask me without me thinking. So basically what happened is he goes, "I want you to know," he goes, "we're in the state we need to be and we're in the town we need to be." I said, "Okay." And now when I'm doing this, I'm writing down on a piece of paper all the markings, all the landmarks, because it's just funneling right out of me. And I said to him, I gave him the name of the cemetery that was a mile up on the left. Now, mind you, there's no GPS or anything, okay?
Were
And
you given any information? Like, did you know
no,
we're trying to solve a murder?
no,
What
I
like
had
what did he
nothing.
told you? All he
He
said is
said,
tell.
He says there's a missing person. This is what he said to me, and this is her first name.
That's
That's
okay.
it. That's it.